Good evening, and welcome to The Intersection, where we have fearlessly addressed issues and provide relevant information and insight through conversations about race, culture, and sports. I'm your host, Dr. Marcus Bright, and I'm especially honored tonight to be joined by a guest co-host from ESPN Networks, Mr. Darryl Jacobs. Welcome to the show, Darryl.
Thank you, Dr. Bright. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm more excited to be here this evening, but more excited to bring on our guests who the viewers and listeners will definitely enjoy and learn a lot about what we're going to talk about this evening.
I'm so excited about our guests. We're on the heels of the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. One guest drafted in 63, one drafted in 64. When you think about the convergence with Dr. King, 63, you got the Birmingham campaign, March on Washington, 64, Lyndon Johnson signs the Civil Rights Act. We have so much to unpack, so much went on in the world of sports as well. I'll let you bring on our special guest, Mr. Jacobs.
Well, our first guest was drafted in the first round by the Philadelphia 76ers in 1963. He also played in the ABA. He's currently the president of the NBA Player Association, Retired Player Association of New York City. Please welcome to the intersection, Mr. Tom Hoover.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Dr. Marcus Bright and Mr. Darryl Jacobs. It's a pleasure, my brother, both of you brothers. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, let me bring on the next guest. He was drafted by the New York Knicks in 1964, played for several NBA teams, most notably the Los Angeles Lakers, Milwaukee Bucks, and of course, the New York Knickerbockers. Please welcome to the intersection, Mr. Fred Crawford.
Thank you very much, my friend, and it's a pleasure being here, particularly with my man Tom. We traveled some miles together, up and down the throughways and byways and the Eastern League. Oh boy!
Yeah, we've done it all.
Well, I only can imagine, but the viewers and listeners are in for a treat this evening. But I'll turn it over to Dr. Mr. Bright to start the formal questions and Q&A.
Mr. Hoover and Mr. Crawford, we're so grateful to have you on, and we'll dive into a broader view of your entire life. But I want to start here. Yesterday, I was at the Miami Beach Convention Center for a big 5,000 Role Models of Excellence project, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Scholarship Breakfast. And it hit me, I know that one of you was drafted in 1963, but in that building, 1963, is when the then Cassius Clay overcame 8-1 odds and knocked out Sonny Liston. And I think that that's just a great place to start, because shortly thereafter, he became Muhammad Ali, and he was mentored by Malcolm X, and he used the vehicle of sports to advance social justice and social issues. And so I want to begin with what is your recollection of that moment in history? Did you follow boxing? What did Muhammad Ali mean to you, and especially during that time?
I was very fortunate, and yes, I did follow boxing. I was at the fight. That time and time frame was very important.
Time out. You were at the fight?
Yeah.
You were at the fight?
Yeah.
Yeah, I told Dr. Bright he has no idea what he's getting into.
Okay.
That's why I wanted to get both of you guys.
I just wanted to get that one clear. You were at the fight. Okay, whoa.
Yeah. At that time frame, I'll get into the rest of it later, but Ali and I have a very special relationship. We were friends. In that time frame, there was so much racism, you couldn't be on Miami Beach. You had to stay in Liberty City. Even though it was the Fifth Street gym, it was still a segregated town. There's no question about it. That night at the fight was a true testament of Black manhood, or the power of the man becoming a man. it gave you inspiration, even though you knew that you were somebody. It gave you that extra to say that, yeah, you are somebody and you don't have to take this and you can forge your own way and they have to respect you. He gave you that sort of thing as an athlete, as a man, and of course as an activist. But Muhammad was a special guy. I'll let Fred tell you. Once we get into it, we've got a little stories. I took Fred down, and I'll let him explain that to you.
Yeah. So Tom and I were with the Knicks, I think, and so Tom says, "Fred, come on, man. I know a shortcut. Let's go." So we went down into the bottom of the garden, and this is where Ali was training for a fight at the Garden, and his man Boudini started yelling out, "There goes the spies for Wilt Chamberlain," because they had been talking about this big fight that was going to happen between Wilt and Muhammad. So Boudini starts running and trying to get out the ring, and all of the trainers and the helpers were yeah, there's those spies. Man, my heart was pounding. Tom ain't telling me nothing about this, man. That was one of the unbelievable funny things that really happened. Me hanging out with Smooth Move, you know what I mean? Yeah, the spies, go get them, and all of the trainers, everybody started running over there. Oh man, that was something. Anyway, Muhammad Ali, man. Something.
Yeah,
I got one question here before.
Yeah.
Before he beats Liston, what can you tell me about his relationship with Malcolm X? There's a great book called Blood Brothers that details it in the book, but what do you know of his relationship with Malcolm X and his mindset, both from a physical training aspect, but then also his mental mindset to be able to take the step that he made transitioning from Cassius Clay to Muhammad Ali a few days later?
Well, I think that all of us at that time frame, you remember when you were 19, 20, 21, you were looking for direction. And I think that he was the same, looking for direction. Malcolm taught you or just spoke in the vernacular of, you're somebody. You are a person. You are an individual. You're a Black man. And you should not allow yourself or anybody to abuse you. Now he said it to me, he said it to Fred, he said it to Ali. Ali, in that time frame of being that big, the number one guy that everybody's looking to knock off, just kept pushing the envelope. He believed what he was saying when he believed it when he refused to go in the draft. That was a mental mindset that he knew who he was. Malcolm more or less just reinforced what you learned from your parents when your parents told you you are somebody. You don't have to take this. You can do that. And once you learn that, Malcolm just reinforced it, because now you see another guy who's out there in the limelight saying, hey, we are people. We're somebody. We built this country. We did these things. So therefore, give us our respect. And mentally, that's where he went with it.
Let me ask you guys a question. Let's talk a little bit about those times. You mentioned being at the fight when Muhammad Ali, then the Cassius Clay, won the world title. But talk about race relations in it and how effective was it in regards to the Black athlete at the time, whether it was Wilt, Bill Russell, Jim Brown. Talk about how you guys actually came together. A lot of times behind the scenes, a lot of people didn't know what's going on. And talk about Harlem at that particular time in New York City.
Well, Tom is basically a Washington guy. I grew up in Harlem, up and down 7th Avenue, up and down 116th Street, where the mosque was, and Malcolm was on the corner on 125th Street in front of Chuck Full of Nuts. It was an old-time franchise. And, the whole group of us, other young fellows who were also basketball players, we'd be gathering around while he's talking about the whole issue of the black man and survival and what we needed to do and how we ought to be thinking about ourselves and our women and our children, and making sure that we understood that we who we are, we were and are who we are, and that we are the descendants of kings and queens and all kinds of real important people who have made contributions to the development of the culture of the world.
Tom, Mr. Hoover, talk a little bit about the challenges you guys face, even being up here in the North, being professional athletes, playing New York Knickerbockers and all that stuff. Talk about some of those challenges within New York City at that particular time.
Well, it was a challenge because you were demanding equality. So it was a challenge every day. When I was drafted, I was the 6th guy, I think it was, or the 5th guy drafted in the draft. And the guy ahead of me, Artie Heyman, they paid him $17,500. Eddie Gottlieb offered me $7,500. I told him I wouldn't come into training camp because I thought I was just as good as Art Heyman. So that was a challenge there. He said, I'll give you $7,500 and a summer job. And my summer job, guess what it was? Driving a yellow cab in Philadelphia. So there was no respect for you. You were expected to, again, handkerchief head, and no offense anywhere, but that's what you were expected. You were expected to accept whatever they said. And we were a new breed. We weren't going to accept what you said because
was a lot of the pro athletes like that at the time, particularly the African Americans, whether it was basketball, NBA, whether it was baseball, in the major leagues at that time. You guys, quite a few guys were playing the Yankees, and whether it was football as well.
Well, you saw it. I mean, Oscar was the catalyst in the NBA. He was the guy, because their poster boy was Bob Cousy. Cousy could play, but if you look at Marcus Haynes, Cousy, took everything from Marcus Haynes. But there was a kid in Brooklyn named the Czar who turned Cousy out, but he would never got a chance to get into the league. So there was a challenge. It was a fight even to go somewhere in a restaurant to eat. There was only 2 restaurants in New York you could eat in, 3 really. Tad Steakhouse on 42nd Street. And Freddie attests to this, besides uptown, I'm talking about downtown, Toots Shores or Jack Dempsey. Rest of it was segregated. That was 63.
To add to what Tom's alluding to, I mean, it's always been a process. The struggle started way back when, and the struggle continues today. It takes on a little different form, and we certainly hear about mega contracts that both individuals and sports and entertainment and dollars are making. But our folks are still struggling with the highest incidence of various medical situations that's going on, difficulties in terms of education. And I was listening to a program today, which I didn't really know that in most of the cities of around the country, when they started the suburban exodus, most of those new highways and things were run right through the middle of very active and very prosperous neighborhoods of Black folks. And that's so you learn something every day. And then I thought about it. I know what the New York situation was, but same thing happened in New Orleans and Mississippi and those kinds of things. So I mean, just as a point of reference, that the struggle continues. We see so much nowadays, and folks are doing things, but for us, as again, which was pointed up by the and when the virus hit, that it hit us more than it hit anybody else. So there's a lot of things to go, but I like what's happening. Basically with the HBCUs and different things, but and I'm very positive about looking forward. I forget the sister who and still we rise, and was her
Maya
her
Angelou.
mantra, Maya Angelou. So that's sort of my mindset now. I view things.
Let's
I just want to jump on what Freddie said. The Black Wall Street in Tulsa, that whole area now is a freeway. So, and you still, as Fred said, it's a struggle. You still got to go out there. You still have to demand. You still have to say, I am, and you still have to be qualified. There's no question.
Yeah. Let's take it back to your childhood. Where were you all raised, and how were you first introduced to the game of basketball, and how did you find yourself matriculating to the NBA?
Freeze?
Well, actually, I was born in Howard Hospital, and in 1940, and I grew up in Harlem, which at that particular time I was catching the tail end of the Renaissance, which was a period of cultural growth and dynamism in the Harlem area, and folks were migrating from the South to Harlem, and that was a very active scene. My father used to play a little ball too, and he played with the Wrens. And I don't know if folks who are familiar with the Wrens, who were the first all-Black championship team in the professional arena, along with the Harlem Globetrotters. So the Harlem experience, I mean, just walking up and down the streets, there's no telling who you might run into. Malcolm, I went to the Y, I met Jackie Robinson and Roy Campanella. And so, the struggle continues. We go up and down and 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. But the thing it just makes me feel so good is when I look around and, hey, we are a strong people, and we continue to make it even in the belly of the beast.
Where did you play collegiately?
I played at St. Bonaventure University, and that's up near Buffalo and Olean, New York. And I played along with the Stitz brothers, who were really prominent athletes at that time. All-Americans and so on and so forth. But when I went there, I think we were the only 3 Black guys on campus. Maybe I think 4 guys in the whole school.
What was that experience like, being the only Blacks on campus?
Well,
That's something that I write about. I write about it in the book in terms of. I have a new book out, Brighter Ways Forward: Sports Reflections on Sports Tech and Socioeconomic Mobility. But the practice that still goes on today, I believe, of the utilization of athletics as colleges' diversity programs.
Well, I think I was very fortunate. As a matter of fact, Sam Stitt, who was the guy who recruited me to go up to St. Bonaventure, he was a dynamic guy, and he sort of laid the groundwork. He was a smart guy, a no nonsense guy, and he set the groundwork. When we had a few incidents on campus, off campus, I mean, and very few on. So in that respect, my experience at St. Bonaventure was a little different than being there. And the school was all Caucasian, and I managed to get along pretty good with so Tom, Sam, and I. But of course, both of them were all Americans and #1 draft picks, so wasn't too much of a problem for us. But there are always those kinds of things that were going on. But I would say that while I was in college at the time, which fortified my thing, I had come down. I had tuberculosis. And I had to stop playing and whatnot. And the people were very cool. They came to the hospital. I'd be in a sanatorium, the whole thing, and it was interesting.
Mr. Hoover.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in Washington, D.C., which is a racist, segregated town. You couldn't, we played our championship high school game at Georgetown University. And it was on a Sunday afternoon, but you knew you had to be out of there by sundown. You couldn't go to Silver Spring, past New Hampshire Avenue, if anybody knows about Washington, and after 6 o'clock. So Washington was a segregated town, and it, I guess, being a kid, I never took anything from anybody. You never called me out of my name without me retaliating. So I had that chip on my shoulder growing up. I went to John Carroll, which was all Catholic school, all white school. And I went to Villanova.
Mr. Hoover, how did you end up at John Carroll, if you don't mind me asking?
My mother said I went to Dunbar first, which was the public school, which was the school in D.C. Mm-hmm. And my mother said, "You're gonna get in trouble out of here. I need to get you out of here." And I left Dunbar, and she got me into John Carroll. They had seen me play in junior high school, the coach of John Carroll, and he came and spoke with my mother, and he said, "This is a great Catholic school," which it was. It is, and still is. It's a great school. And she said, "Yeah, that's where you need to be. You need that discipline." And that's where I wound up at Archbishop John Carroll.
Let's talk about the cultural differences. Both you guys went to PWIs, predominantly white institutions, to play your college career, and talk about the cultural differences, between our culture as African American men and then the other cultures that you had to integrate into. And what part did you guys, as pro athletes at that particular time, talk about some of those secret meetings? I want the viewers to hear some of these secret meetings, not secret meetings, but meetings in which you guys met to talk about race relations and fighting for civil rights and social injustices and equality?
Well, I mean, you know, from my perspective, you know, we were up there in the Allegheny Hills, and where we encountered, as I say, in pretty much, you know, in campus life and moving around there. We the few things that we encountered, I think we got together on, because there were some other schools that weren't too far away. And you know, all of the black girls and guys would get together and you know, communicate about some of the issues that we were having to address. You know, not too far, of course, is Syracuse, New York. Syracuse had a huge campus, and Ernie Davis and of course Jim Brown are Syracuse guys, and you know, everybody had formed little formal and informal networks where we would communicate, you know, the issues that we were having to deal with, and you know, again, providing the kind of support that we needed to make sure that each of us were able to survive if there were issues. You know, we had some ways and some places to reach out for. Of course, you know, the NAACP was always, you know, involved in those towns, and they had those chapters, and those folks had also, you know, reached out to us from time to time to determine, you know, how we were making it. I mean, you know, the guys I'm talking about, and Tom, you know, back in the day, not to disparage any of the younger people, you had to be kind of tough. I mean, our whole lineage from way back when, yeah, you had to be tough. You know, you had to be a survivor, and a little more so than the young folks today, having a little less challenging, I think. I don't know. What do you think, Tom?
Well, Villanova was all white. It was Frank Budd, Otis Drayton on the track team. It was George Raveling, myself, Hubie White, and Bernie Chavis on the basketball team. And it was Billy Joe on the football team. And that was it. So it was about 10 of us on campus. You remember, and this is prevalent today, keep in mind, this is Pennsylvania. This is Western Pennsylvania where Villanova is. Even though it's right outside of Philadelphia, it's still Pennsylvania. And you see the struggles that they're going through now in Pennsylvania, especially with this last governor's race. So I more or less, there was nothing that I or anyone other than Wilt. I used to go to the Warriors games, and Dip would drive me home back to campus, and we would have conversations and talk about the different things. And he would say, you just got to calm down. And I would always come back and say, I can't be calm, man. This shit excuse me, this stuff is just crazy out here. But he was like, yeah, I know, but you got to, you know, just be calm, take it step by step by step. So Dip was my mentor because we went to Raleigh, North Carolina to play in the Dixie Classic. And we got off the train, and Miss Raleigh welcomed all the white guys. Welcome to Raleigh, welcome to Raleigh, welcome to Raleigh. When she got to me, she turned around and walked off the train. Well, I said, hey, you can't shake my hand and welcome me to Raleigh? And everybody, shh, you can't say that, don't do that. I said, why not? I'm part of this. You can't do that. So that was the beginning of, we're going to show you who's boss. At the Raleigh Coliseum, the game was played. They did not play the Star Spangled Banner. They played Dixie. And And they said, "Yahoo!" And they threw a noose on the floor. There was not a black person in there except in the bathroom. So that was the environment that I dealt with. And that was what I would bring back to Dip, and we would sit and talk and say, this is crazy. This is crazy. So that chip came from high school right up into college, right into the pros when you disrespected me and said, you can only make this, but I'll give you a drive driving a yellow cab. Well, I'm just as good as you are. I'm just as good as the next guy. So they didn't see it like that. And I'm going to make you see it and respect me and look at me. You're not going to turn your back to me. So that's the way, because I went to Philadelphia because there was nothing in Pennsylvania for us at all. So you had to go to Philadelphia if you wanted to have a ham hock and some collard greens and some fried chicken. You had to get into Philly. Of course, every Saturday, I went to a guy's house named Sonny Hill, and his wife would cook for me, and then we would go play up at Haddington. So that was that was my release, my way of getting rid of all of that was building up during the week at school. There was a golf course across the street. We could caddy there, but we couldn't play there.
Well, that's great. Gentlemen, my producer is telling me we got to go to a commercial break. We're enjoying this conversation here. We got to pay a little bit of the bills, guys, but we'll be right back here on The Intersections in about 1 minute and 30 seconds.
We're never alone. And that is our strength. Because when we're doubted, we'll play as one. When we're held back, we'll go farther and harder. If we're not taken seriously, we'll prove that wrong. And if we don't fit the sport, we'll change the sport. We know things won't always go our way.
And the world's sporting events are postponed or cancelled.
But whatever it is, we'll find a way. And when things aren't fair, we'll come together for change.
We have a responsibility
to make this world a better place.
And no matter how bad it gets, we will always come back stronger. Because nothing can stop what we can do together.
should be better than that.
Welcome back to The Intersection. I'm your co-host for the day, Darryl Jacobs, ESPN Network, and of course, the host in his new show, Dr. Marcus Bright. We're here with two NBA legends, Mr. Tom Hoover, currently president of the NBA Retired Player Association of New York, and of course, Fred Crawford, another NBA legend. And we're talking about race culture and how to integrate during their times, particularly in the 1960s and 1970s, and relates today. And Dr. Bright is going to start the second half of the show off with some questions.
Well, this is really an incredible discussion. Tell me about you all's recruitment processes to St. Bonaventure, to Villanova. Did you sign an NIL deal? But I think, your recruitment process, but then also, given you all's elite athletic ability and the platform that it afforded you both in college and in the NBA, what kind of responsibility did you all feel that went along with that platform towards the community that you originated from?
Well, Tom, my main thing was, and it was, folks had proposed to me that you got to keep your eyes on the prize. And I mean, you could go all the way back with the Jack Johnson and Jackie Robinson and Pop Gates with the Wrens and John Isaacs and on and on. So we, in spite of everything, man, we had some serious role models and people who were providing direction, even if I wasn't speaking to them per se. We had our eyes, at least I had my eyes on the prize and watch and say, man, I think I can do some of that. And which it was very, very helpful for me in order to formulate, but before you can do anything, you gotta have a vision of what that looks like. And these gentlemen, these stars, these real people provided that kind of image. I don't know, and I was talking with some people, being a Harlem guy, I was informed that Sidney Poitier and others had like a rib joint, a takeout rib joint on 7th Avenue, and they used to, before they became famous, and these were the kind of people that were, moving around, and the music was amazing. They had all kind of jazz clubs and others clubs that were.
And Mr. Crawford, talk a little bit about that. Some of the people that people only read about that you guys actually were friends with and came in contact with in Harlem during the Harlem Renaissance. Whether from an NBA standpoint, you mentioned Wilt, which you guys know as Dip. Talk about meeting like, Jackie Robinson and Sugar Ray Robinson, who had a restaurant in Harlem at the time. Talk about the Harlem Renaissance, both you guys.
Absolutely. I really would need to talk about, and I'm not recalling all of the writers and playwrights and various entertainment venues that were there. Arthur E. Schomburg, who there's a library, is called the Schomburg Collection, which is the most renowned collection of African American history and literature anywhere you can find, I think, in the world. And some of the writers, James Baldwin, as a matter of fact, went to the same junior high school that I went to, and he was a famous writer, and there were so many writers and entertainers. Count Basie's that was a prominent figure in the community, and so and jazz, and Miles Davis, and I mean, you couldn't just in terms of entertainment, you couldn't walk a block or two without really running into or seeing someone famous in the music or literary or painting era that was a part of the community, part of the fabric of the community. They weren't like and so let me just jump back for a minute. Yeah, Harry Belafonte was Sidney Poitier's partner in this rib joint, and they used to deliver stuff to people's homes, out of their stuff. Which, when the folks told me that, and they showed me where it was, so that and they had a place on 135th Street called the Little Theater, where all of these folks had gotten they used to do plays there, and it was a small venue, but it was very well attended, and so many others got. And then, I mean, I won't even have to go to talk about the Apollo Theater and all of the people who came through there. I recall seeing, Ray Charles, Gladys Knight and the Pips, I could, you know, go through all of that kind of stuff. And so as I was moving along, just from my own perspective, yeah, I opened up a sporting goods store when I was in the NBA called Appletown Sporting Goods, and it was amazing. The people from Pro Kids, which was a big sneaker at the time, headquarters came. They wanted to know how were we selling so many sneakers and shoes. And well, I explained to them, well, you know, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Tom Hoover, and Wilt Chamberlain, and Tiny Archibald. All these guys used to come by and just shoot a fat. Emmett Bryant, you name it, came by the store.
And talk about. I want you to talk about how did that, you know, during the movement of the civil rights. How did you guys talk, you know, with those particular figures that you mentioned? I think, Mr. Hoover, you can share some of your experiences with those meetings when you guys got together and talked about equality, maybe protesting, some of the things you guys can do, because you guys were high profile individuals in the Black community, particularly being Black athletes.
Well, I can only go with Oscar, and Oscar was the catalyst for what we have now as the union. He was the guy that really put it on the plate and said, we're not slaves anymore. I think you asked a question earlier about who else and what other athletes were there. Well, you remember Kurt Flood said that I'm not a slave, you know, and he held out. You had one or two football players, but the NFL has such a stranglehold. It wasn't really, they didn't say anything. Jim Brown was the only guy that really said, hey, I had enough of this. I'm going to go make movies. There was nobody in baseball besides Jackie. He had the place on 135th Street chock full of nuts. We used to go in there and sit and talk. And he would say all the time, it's a struggle. Just never give up. And as Fred alluded to earlier, we are still in a fight. I mean, we come from stock that has been fighting for the past 4,000 years. They say 400 over here, but we've always survived. And we will survive this. We just have to keep going at it and keep it going. And that's what we're doing. You can't not. Go ahead.
I think
no, that's okay. Somebody said, and you can't knock the guy.
I think would be without mentioning, you know, some of the greats, you know, Adam Clayton Powell and Percy Sutton and David Dinkins was the first Black mayor of the city of New York, and so there was a real strong political base, and the church is, you know, we Reverend Butts and Abyssinia Baptist Church and many other churches. I'm not recalling them all, and I know I'm leaving some out.
Well, down on 116th Street, Convent, right? Convent Avenue Baptist. And the other one, Canaan on 116th Street. You know, those guys, and Adam, of course, at Abyssinia, those guys, they will be walking up and down the street. You could have conversation with them. You know, there's many a night I talk to Adam, just shooting the breeze in Doc's place, the chicken joint, or, you know, in Wilk's place or at the Y. So we had a chance to talk to Jackie. We had a chance to talk to Adam, Percy, Charlie Rangel. You know, those were the times that you could walk, as Freddie said, up and down 7th Avenue or 125th Street, you see anybody.
Let me ask you guys. Let me ask you guys a question. How did you guys? You guys are around at that particular time. Seemed like you were all around the power figures. You know, with Malcolm and Adam Clayton Powell, who was very prominent in Congress and in politics at the time. Let's talk about how did you guys work with other athletes from the different cities within the NBA, particularly the Black athletes, in regards to coming together or providing the message that's coming from Malcolm. You guys were basically living with Malcolm, so to speak, in that particular time, you know, as well. And Dr. King will come to Harlem as well. And you could talk about when Dr. King came to Harlem as well.
Well, I'll let Freddie take this, but you got to remember, other guys, I mentioned Oscar. And Oscar, it was a fight because guys get comfortable making $2. And if you tell them you're not going to get this $1.50, that's $2 anymore, but you're going to down the line get $5, they can't see that. A lot of them can't, but a lot of them could. So you say, what was the message and how did you bring it to everybody? The only thing that you can do with people is give them the message. And if they choose to accept it, then you know, okay, we can take this step and go forward. And this is where we are today. If all of us collectively, we can't even manufacture toilet tissue. Toilet tissue, the simplest thing in the world, because we don't manufacture anything. In the entertainment business, they own the distribution and the labels and everything. And not until hip hop came and these kids start selling records out of the trunk of their car. And then they say, well, wait a minute. I don't have to give this man this kind of money. I don't have to. I can do this myself. So it's a process, as Freddie said earlier. It's a process, and it's a process that's still going on.
And Dr. Bright probably can talk or share something about that, because his new book, as he mentioned, and I'll let him share a little bit about that, about the socioeconomics and the impact within the community regarding record deals, record sales, and stuff of that nature.
Well, the book, Brighter Ways Forward, Reflections on Sports, Tech, and Socioeconomic Mobility, is really an extension of what we're talking about right now. Deep dive into the role of sports, every aspect of it. We heard Mr. Hoover and Mr. Crawford. I deem that in the book athletic lottery recipients, and not that one does not work tremendously hard to become the best in the world at their sport, but just the limited number of spots make it a lottery. You have millions of young men, for example, trying to get a limited number of slots. So you're an athletic lottery recipient, even going to John Carroll High School, even to Villanova, even to the NBA. And so how do we leverage the power, the pull, the positioning of sports and transfer that into other arenas, other areas, both utilizing the platform to elevate important issues, utilizing the platform of sports, but also the techniques. I'm in Miami, Florida, where arguably the best high school youth football players in the world are produced through economically marginalized community like Liberty City, like Overtown. And so that's done through a number of different things, but there's a whole training ground, a whole pipeline that is producing this athletic excellence. And I believe that we can utilize some of these same strategies to produce excellence in fields like tech, in fields like healthcare, other fields, entrepreneurship. And so there's a deep dive in that in the book. But just grateful really just for this conversation here tonight. And I really want Mr. Hoover and Mr. Crawford, if you all can touch on, I know, Mr. Hoover, you mentioned the experience that you had in Raleigh, North Carolina with the noose being thrown on the floor and them playing Dixie. Are there any other incidents or moments that stick out to you as you all travel the road in college and professional basketball?
Well,
I just want to interject that, part that's consistent with what you're saying. we have in New York, Tom's got the Retired Players Association, and they're certainly that's part of his and our agenda. I've been involved for over 55 years with the Rucker Pro Basketball thing, which is a renowned basketball program that does exactly what you're talking about. Rucker was a park man and who started us all and got us all focused on the necessity of getting a quality education. From there, we started what we call the Each One Teach One program, which is now a national program that whose mindset is we started out we would send players around to the various schools to check on the little guys and girls that were in our program to see what's going on with school, as well as they knew they had entree to us, and we'd have all of the pros and Tom and come in and speak to the youngsters and talk about what with Bob McCullough, who was my partner in these endeavors, to talk about what's down the road and how do you transcend some of these obstacles, and you can do it. And I just wanted to make sure I shared that there are some things in place in Philadelphia, and as I said, the Retired Players Association of New York does all kinds of things which Tom can share with you.
Yeah, I mean, we have the program in Miami. We've got a chapter down there. We've got 12 chapters across the country. But what we are doing to help these kids is we have a esports academy that we try and do every year at All-Star. Of course, we're not going to do it this year in Utah for obvious reasons. But next year in Indianapolis, we will. We either show a film. Last year, in Cleveland, we showed Just Mercy. No, I'm sorry. In Chicago, we showed the film Just Mercy 2 years ago at All-Star. We try and educate these kids. If you play this game, the video games, NBA 2K or whatever have you, there are 1,250 jobs in the video to put this together. So what we're going to do and what we do is teach you how to do this. There's a linguist, there's graphic artists, there's a stylist, there's the musical guy, there's the speech person. 5 jobs right there. Mm-hmm. So what we're telling our youngsters is, if you're playing this, you really want to do it, you can do this. So this is how we, continue to teach and continue to help and reach back in our communities to help as many kids as we possibly can. We're trying to put something together now with Google where they will come in and partner with us so that we can make this a program that can sustain itself year round.
It's amazing that you mentioned that. It's amazing that you mentioned that. I write about it in the book, but even more so, we're putting it into action. Esports, all right, there's a bit in the book called Inspiring Tech On-Ramps. Esports is a on-ramp into the economic inclusion of our communities in the tech space. And as we speak, I was on the phone. I'm partnering with a Google software engineer by the name of Randy Raymond to put coding into schools that don't have access to it currently, don't have the content, the context, or an instructor to teach them these coding languages like Python, JavaScript that are going to be currency in the new economy. And esports is exactly the kind of on-ramps that we need. That's a brighter way forward. And I look forward to working with you, Mr. Hoover.
It'd be my pleasure. Make sure we exchange stuff after this, so how we can get in touch, because it's very, very important. No, we can't produce the toilet tissue. No, we cannot produce the apple and the orange. Okay, so the next thing that's coming down the pike is the tech. And we've got a chance to get and be a part of that. We can be a part of that. Coding. Kids have no idea what coding is. They have zero idea of what they do. But if you grab a kid and he gets interested in something, man, that kid will stick to you like glue.
Yeah.
And you'll learn everything there is about it. So now we got another kid that can code and another kid that can code. So yeah, it's what we do. We try and get into these communities to try and help these young people as best we can. I'm just going to say this: when we were in Cleveland, we funded they have esports clubs now in these high schools. So one high school was needed some equipment, and we gave them the equipment that they needed. But I wanted to go a step further, but we didn't have the money, because when they go and compete with the high schools in Cleveland, in the suburbs of Cleveland, their equipment that they're using to play the game is outdated. Because these kids have the chairs, the microphone, they've got everything right there. And they've got a person that comes around every half an hour and gives them a break, the water, the juice, the whole 9 yards. Because if you're sitting there playing all the time, you need to get up and move and recalculate your brain. So yeah, it's very, very important to me to teach these kids, because it's the future.
Yes.
It definitely is the future.
We are currently, with the group that I'm affiliated with, also have started an esports degree program at the College of City of New York, with feeder schools from the public schools in Harlem and the South Bronx. And we're well on our way. And this year will be the initial year of having entrance into this degree providing program in esports and that whole kind of thing. So with I think the gentleman's name is Stan Altman, who's the co-leader of the program. So we recognize that, and we're sort of trying to cover a lot of territory, but it's essential that we prepare ourselves for technology and do something about the digital divide that is now presenting the next obstacles to our folks moving forward.
Gentlemen,
just to tap onto that, if we can get this thing running, we're going to have Academy this summer up at City College, if everything can work out, to host these kids for an esports. So go ahead. I'm sorry, Darryl.
Well, that's okay. That was important to get that in. And gentlemen, I want to thank you for taking the time to share your experience with us this evening. Dr. Bright, before we go, talk a little bit about your new book that's on Amazon that happens to be a #1 seller in the business educational piece.
They were just talking about it. The book is in words what these brothers just articulated and are putting into action. Sports, tech, and socioeconomic mobility, brighter ways forward. This is not just a book, it's an action plan. You can get it on Amazon, but even more so, I'm just so grateful for you, Mr. Jacobs, and convening Mr. Hoover and Mr. Crawford. Grateful for the Rising Coaches Network, one of the biggest networks of college, of basketball coaches, period, in the world. And I really believe that through the vehicle of sports, we can transform our communities through tech and other industries. And this is really a divine connection, I truly believe. Last thing I'll say, 2 years ago, my mom made her transition into heaven. She passed on this day two years ago. And she grew up in Alamo, Tennessee, picking cotton. I'm the first generation of my family not to pick cotton. The colored schools in Crockett County in September and October, they didn't even go to school. They had to pick the cotton harvest. And we still have Jim Crow school system, especially system dynamics, especially when it comes to tech, as you articulated. Our children not having access to the content, not having the adequate context so they understand what it's about, not having the funding, not having the equipment to prepare themselves to be economically viable in the future. And so I'm just so grateful for tonight and for Rising Coaches and for the work that you gentlemen are doing. And we look forward to moving all of this forward in a brighter ways forward, sports tech and socioeconomic mobility.
And Dr. Bright, where can they find you at?
Find me at Dr. Marcus Bright on Twitter and Instagram, Facebook, Doc Bright. You can email me at drmarcusbright@gmail.com.
Yes, and I just put it up on the screen right there so they can see where to find you at. On Twitter, as he mentioned, at Dr. Marcus Bright. That's all together on Twitter, Instagram, and on Facebook is at Doc, and it's spelled DOC, space Bright, BRIGHT as well. Gentlemen, thank you again for coming on to the show this evening. Please join my illustrious host and guest here on the Intersection next week for some exciting topic and some exciting new guests. Until then, please be safe. Have a terrific week, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
We're never alone. And that is our strength. Because when we're doubted, we'll play as one. When we're held back, we'll go farther and harder. If we're not taken seriously, we'll prove that wrong. And if we don't fit the sport, we'll change the sport. We know things won't always go our way.
And the world's sporting events are postponed or cancelled.
But whatever it is, we'll find a way. And when things aren't fair, we'll come together for change.
We have a responsibility
To make this world a better place.
And no matter how bad it gets, we will always come back stronger. Because nothing can stop what we can do together.